In the heart of Buckingham Palace, a secret quietly emerged, one so powerful it left both King Charles and Prince William speechless. It wasn't about tradition or titles, but a personal message from Queen Elizabeth II herself. And the person at the center of it all? Not a king, but Catherine, the Princess of Wales. What did the Queen see in her that others missed? Stay with us as we uncover a truth that could reshape the monarchy forever. It was a quiet evening in Buckingham Palace. Outside, a thick fog curled around the gates like a secret trying to keep itself hidden. Inside, however, something extraordinary was about to unfold. Something that would silently ripple through the very heart of the royal family. Princess Anne, known for her calm demeanor and unwavering loyalty, had requested a rare private meeting. No advisors, no assistants, just her, King Charles, and Prince William. The room she chose was lined with history, polished dark wood, towering portraits of past monarchs, and an antique clock ticking steadily, as if marking the beginning of something monumental. With deliberate stillness, Anne retrieved an old letter from within a plain folder. It was weathered, folded many times, the edges slightly frayed. She placed it on the table and said nothing. It wasn't necessary. The weight of the letter said it all. King Charles reached for it first, his hand shaking slightly. William leaned in, his expression tense, eyes narrowing as he read the familiar handwriting of the late Queen Elizabeth. What they discovered wasn't what anyone had expected. It wasn't about Charles. It wasn't about William either. It was about Catherine. The late Queen had written this message with deep intention, and it had been entrusted solely to Anne. For years, she had kept it hidden, waiting for the right moment. This was it. Inside that room, the Queen's vision for the future of the monarchy was finally revealed. Not as a formal decree, but as a grandmother's heartfelt belief. She saw something in Catherine, not just as a supportive royal, but as the very soul who could lead the crown forward. In that moment, silence consumed the room. The monarchy had just been handed a mirror, and the reflection wasn't what they had imagined. As the silence deepened, the letter sat in the center of the table like a flame that refused to go out. It wasn't just any letter. It was Queen Elizabeth's final private message. And at the center of that message was Catherine, the Princess of Wales. Her name appeared again and again, not as a consort or support figure, but as someone who embodied everything the Queen believed the crown needed to survive the shifting tides of the 21st century. The Queen described Catherine as kind yet unshakable, graceful but grounded. She praised her ability to connect with people without demanding attention, and her natural ability to lead without seeking power. Charles looked as though the walls around him had closed in. He had waited his entire life to wear the crown, and now this letter, this message, called into question everything he thought he knew about succession and purpose. William remained silent, reading and rereading the lines with eyes that betrayed his confusion. He had grown up preparing to be king, yet now he was learning that his grandmother had seen Catherine as the one to carry the crown forward, not in place of him, but in a new, unprecedented way. Princess Anne watched them carefully, her expression unreadable. She wasn't there to debate or soften the blow. She was simply fulfilling her duty, passing on the Queen's last personal request. And while the letter didn't change the law of succession, it shifted the emotional foundation of the monarchy itself. It introduced a question the family had never seriously asked. Could someone not born into royalty become its guiding light? For Queen Elizabeth, the answer had clearly been yes. In that moment, Catherine's quiet strength took on a whole new meaning. And the monarchy, once firmly rooted in tradition, felt itself inching towards something unexpected. The following morning, a different kind of meeting was held, one far more official and steeped in quiet urgency. Inside one of the grand chambers of Buckingham Palace, a select group of senior advisors, longtime royal confidants, and close family members assembled. It looked like a routine gathering, but those inside knew better. The air was heavier than usual, thick with uncertainty and the weight of an unspoken shift. Once again, it was Princess Anne who led the way. She walked in with the same folder in her hand, her steps measured, her presence composed but firm. King Charles entered next, his face tense, revealing the strain of the night before. Not long after, Prince William arrived. Though he carried himself with composure, there was something distant in his eyes, like he had not yet processed what had been laid before him. As everyone settled into their seats, Anne moved toward the table and placed the letter gently at the center. She began speaking, not with anger or urgency, but with purpose. She reminded those present that this wasn't her decision, nor Charles's, nor William's. It was Queen Elizabeth's final personal wish. The advisors leaned in as the letter was read aloud. The Queen's handwriting was unmistakable, elegant, deliberate, and deeply personal. Line after line described Catherine not just as a royal wife, but as a woman capable of redefining what leadership meant. It wasn't about lineage, but character. It wasn't about tradition, but timing. Though the Queen had not rewritten the rules, she had clearly reimagined the spirit of the monarchy. And in that room of noble blood and royal duty, something undeniable had taken root. No one could escape the shift happening in real time. It was no longer just a matter of who wore the crown, but of who the people and the Queen believed could carry its weight with meaning. And that answer was beginning to become crystal clear. For Charles, the moment felt like betrayal, cloaked in sentiment. His mother's words, though lovingly written, cast a shadow on his reign, before it had even settled into place. He had waited longer than any heir in British history to ascend the throne. Now, just as he stood on the edge of his legacy, his mother's final message suggested that the future lay not with him, but with someone else entirely. His hand struck the table, not in rage, but in disbelief. His voice trembled as he questioned the letter's authenticity, hoping it might somehow be misunderstood. But Anne didn't flinch. She reminded him gently but firmly that the Queen had written this herself in her own hand and had trusted only Anne with its safekeeping. There was no mistake, no exaggeration, just her final truth, revealed at the moment she believed it would matter most. William, on the other hand, sat quietly, his emotions more difficult to read. His shoulders rose and fell with deep, uneasy breaths. For so long he had walked the path meant for a king. Now, the Queen's words painted a future in which his wife, not he, was seen as the crown's greatest hope. It wasn't anger that clouded William's expression. It was sorrow. He loved Catherine deeply. He admired her, respected her, and knew better than anyone what she had endured behind closed doors. But now he found himself questioning everything he had believed was inevitable. Was he being set aside? Or was he being shown a different kind of future, one where leadership didn't always come from the throne, and tried to offer comfort? She told him that Catherine's rise didn't threaten his value. It redefined it, and in that moment, William realized this wasn't about losing power. It was about sharing purpose. While the palace's grand rooms echoed with tension and the letter passed from hand to hand, Catherine was in another wing entirely, peaceful, unaware, and going about her nightly routine. She had just tucked the children into bed, her gentle voice telling bedtime stories, as if the outside world hadn't changed. Sitting near the window afterward, she gazed out at the mist rolling across the gardens. Something felt strange, like a quiet pull in the air, but she couldn't quite place it. Catherine had always trusted her instincts, and that night, they whispered that something unseen was stirring. She never asked for this. From the very beginning, she had walked beside William not to seek power, but to offer support. Her presence had been one of steady compassion, of duty carried out in silence. And perhaps that's exactly why the Queen saw her as the one who could carry the monarchy forward. Catherine never chased attention. She never demanded praise. She simply served. With her feet firmly on the ground and her heart always turned toward the people, she had unknowingly positioned herself as the very figure the royal family needed most. Unaware of the letter, unaware of the discussions or the shock it had caused, Catherine was still just Catherine, a mother, a wife, a woman of calm strength. Yet even in her unawareness, she embodied the very qualities the Queen believed were crucial for the monarchy's survival. Outside her window, the mist made the palace lights shimmer faintly, like signals in the fog. And somewhere within her, Catherine knew that something important was coming. What she didn't know was that behind those stone walls a revolution had begun. Quiet, respectful, and led by love. And at its center stood a woman who had never asked for a crown, but might soon be asked to carry it. As whispers of the Queen's private letter began to seep beyond palace walls, the public's curiosity ignited. At first, it was little more than speculation among royal watchers and seasoned reporters. But soon, murmurs turned conversations, and conversations into headlines. Who had Queen Elizabeth really entrusted with the future of the crown? And why did the answer seem to point not to the reigning monarch or the next in line, but to Catherine? The response was mixed. Supporters of tradition were puzzled, some even outraged. After all, William was the rightful heir. To elevate Catherine above him, even in influence, seemed like rewriting centuries of protocol. Critics argued that Catherine lacked the political experience, the gravitas, the battlefield of diplomacy required for such a task. They pointed out how much time she dedicated to raising her children, questioning whether she had the capacity for leadership on a global scale. But others, perhaps a growing majority, saw things differently. They saw in Catherine a reflection of the modern world, someone who didn't demand authority but earned trust quietly over time. She had navigated scandals, media storms, and personal scrutiny without ever lashing out. Her kindness wasn't performative, it was consistent. And her connection with the people? It wasn't forged through speeches, but through smiles, handshakes, and tireless work behind the scenes. As the Queen's wish gained traction in the public sphere, many began to understand why Catherine had captured the late monarch's heart. She wasn't a product of royalty, but of resilience. And in a time when the monarchy seemed out of touch to many, Catherine stood out as someone who truly represented the values the crown needed to survive: humility, service, and quiet strength. In living rooms across the country, people began asking not whether she deserved this trust, but why it had taken so long for others to see what the Queen had seen all along. Before she was the Princess of Wales, Catherine Elizabeth Middleton was simply a girl from Berkshire. Born on January 9, 1982, she entered the world not into luxury, but into a household defined by hard work and steady values. Her father, Michael, worked in aviation logistics, and her mother, Carol, once served as a flight attendant. Their early years together weren't lavish, but they were full of love, discipline, and quiet ambition. In 1984, the family relocated to Jordan from Michael's work with British Airways. Catherine attended an English-speaking nursery there, her first exposure to a culture beyond the United Kingdom. By 1986, they returned to England, settling in the countryside of Berkshire. From a young age, Catherine stood out for her calm presence and maturity. She wasn't the loudest in the room, but always among the most composed. Carol Middleton's small idea of selling party supplies from home would blossom into a thriving business, Party Pieces, which provided Catherine and her siblings access to excellent education. But more importantly, it offered a first-hand lesson in entrepreneurship, discipline, and resilience. Watching her mother build a business from the ground up left a lasting impression. Catherine learned that success wasn't handed down, it was earned through late nights, sacrifice, and purpose. Catherine later earned a spot at Marlborough College, where she not only excelled academically, but also captained the field hockey team. Her strength, both physical and mental, grew quietly. She also earned the prestigious Gold Duke of Edinburgh Award, a recognition that required dedication and community service. Later, she chose to delay university, taking a gap year to study art in Florence, volunteer in Chile, and work on a docked ship in Southampton. These experiences molded her into someone far beyond the media's image of a royal bride. She wasn't groomed for the throne. She carved her own path. And maybe, just maybe, that's what the Queen valued most. Someone who knew who she was long before anyone else told her who to be. Catherine and William's love story began in the early 2000s at the University of St. Andrews in Scotland. What started as a quiet friendship in shared lectures and group dinners slowly blossomed into something deeper. By 2002, they had moved into a shared house with friends. That proximity sparked a romance that would eventually grip a nation. But at the time, it was theirs alone. They kept it private for as long as they could. But the press soon caught wind. By 2004, photos of the couple on a ski trip in Switzerland confirmed what many had suspected. As their relationship became public, so did the pressure. The weight of media attention, speculation, and royal expectations descended upon them. And in 2007, it reached a breaking point. The couple briefly split, an experience that Catherine later admitted was deeply painful. But rather than crumble under the spotlight, Catherine used that time to rediscover herself. She didn't give interviews. She didn't seek sympathy. Instead, she found quiet confidence. When they reunited, the relationship returned stronger than ever. Catherine had proven not only her resilience, but her independence. She wasn't waiting for a prince to define her. She had become her own person. By November of 2010, their engagement was announced, and on April 29, 2011, she walked down the aisle in Westminster Abbey, not as a celebrity or symbol, but as a woman deeply loved by the future king. That day, she became the Duchess of Cambridge, stepping into a life of immense responsibility. But it wasn't the title that changed her. It was the journey. Full of private heartbreaks and public lessons, Catherine had already shown the world she could weather storms with grace. Now, as wife to a future king and mother to 3 children, she continued proving that the crown wasn't about appearances, it was about substance. And she had it in abundance. Catherine never needed grand speeches or dramatic gestures to lead. Her power came from something quieter, something deeper. She showed up where it mattered: hospitals, schools, crisis centers, and community programs. She didn't seek the cameras, yet they always seemed to follow her. But even when they did, she never made it about herself. It was about the people she met, the causes she believed in, and the stories she helped bring to light. Perhaps one of the most touching examples of her leadership came in 2018. Without fanfare, without press releases, Catherine cut 7 inches of her hair and donated it to the Little Princess Trust, a charity that makes wigs for children undergoing cancer treatment. She told no one, no press coverage, no announcement, just an act of quiet compassion. It wasn't about being seen, it was about helping a child feel whole again. This is the kind of leadership the Queen saw in her. Thoughtful, genuine, enduring. While others battled for attention or influence, Catherine simply worked. Her focus on mental health, particularly among children and mothers, led to real change. Initiatives like Heads Together and the Early Years campaign weren't figurehead programs, they were years of behind-the-scenes planning, visits, and consultations. Catherine understood that being royal meant more than showing up for photo ops. It meant using the platform to make lives better. Her style wasn't loud, but it was lasting. Those around her began to notice that she wasn't just supporting the monarchy, she was quietly shaping its future. And perhaps that's why Queen Elizabeth placed such profound trust in her. When the cameras turned off and the crowd moved on, Catherine stayed. She listened longer, asked more, gave more. And in those unseen moments, a future queen was quietly being made, not by title, but by heart. As the quiet storm unfolded inside Buckingham Palace, another surprising figure began stepping forward: Princess Anne. Long respected but often kept in the background, Anne had always been the crown's most dedicated workhorse. With a calendar packed with engagements and a reputation for blunt honesty, she had proven herself, time and time again, as one of the monarchy's most reliable anchors. And now, with Queen Elizabeth gone and the family in transition, Anne found herself in a position of unexpected influence. She didn't want a spotlight. She never had. But in a world where glamour often outweighed substance, Anne's steady presence became a beacon of what the monarchy could be. And with the Queen's private letter naming Catherine as the crown's future, Anne stepped in, not as a challenger to the throne, but as its quiet protector. Her voice became the one that reminded others what duty truly meant. She wasn't pushing a new agenda. She was upholding the Queen's final wish. At the same time, questions began to arise about Queen Camilla. What did this mean for her role? For Charles? For William's path to kingship? The answers weren't immediate, but the tension in the air made one thing undeniable. A transformation had begun. Not in rebellion, but in quiet revolution. The old structures, the weight of history, the rigid expectations, these things no longer held the power they once did. The public was watching, not for a fairy tale, but for something real. And that realness was found not in titles, but in action, in consistency, in kindness, in strength that didn't need to shout. Anne understood that, and so did Catherine. Together, their roles, though very different, began weaving a new vision for what the crown could represent. One that honored the past but didn't cling to it. One that moved forward, just as the Queen had hoped.